Good day, everybody. Presenting foreclosures and the highest and best offer. How's that work? We'll get to that in a moment. Let's cover some house cleaning. Good day, everybody. I am Connor McIver, REMAX's Paris 911 team. We're local real estate agents headquartered here in Santa Clarita Valley, serving greater Los Angeles and, of course, Southern California. We did put together a post this morning earlier that's going to be home at foreclosures.paris911.com. Paris is like France, but we're in Southern California. Not that Paris either, because that's spelled differently. Paris is for a person. My better half in the business, I was the 911 with LAPD for a long time. So there you go. So Paris 911 is our brand. Foreclosures.paris911.com. You'll see the blog post that we put together, the article we put together just below the video, so check that out. Now, one of the things we get asked quite often before we get into the meat of the daily real estate show, of course, at housingradio.com, we get asked about searching for real estate and also getting home values. A lot of people get screwed over when they're searching online, trying to find real estate for sale. All of a sudden, they have their personal information sold to a ton of agents willing to pay for it. Also, those people, besides searchers, those people that are trying to find out what their property is worth, again, they get conned into subscribing or putting their personal information into one of these systems. I'm local. I'm one person. I'm the head of a team here at REMAX, and your personal information stays in my custody. That's it. So very simply, SCVNest, SCVNEST.com. That's where you can go search the actual multiple listing service and find out what your home is worth. Very simple. All right, so let's get into this. Back in the day, we were some of the first in the new real estate cycle, the one after the tanking of the market back in 07, late 06, to actually get in and be hired by a particular bank, and that was Citigroup. So that's verifiable. You can find that information. Happy to send that to you. But we were actual REO agents for the bank, so that included some training, some processes that we had to go through before we were blessed in the handling of their real estate owned assets. Real estate owned becomes REO. So if you see the acronym REO, that stands for real estate owned. That's basically, you go back to where the banks did things on paper, and some still do. That was a line item, REO, up at the top. So they were able to show on a balance sheet how many REOs that particular bank was carrying. And back in the day when the market collapsed in on itself, Citibank did have a lot and was a big player in the REO real estate owned game. And there's still a few floating around out there, but it has come down. Like today, looking at the distressed real estate inventory, we're hovering in Southern California, as far as active, about 512 total. 512 total distressed properties. That's going to include also short sales. And these are properties that are currently active on the market for sale. The other option out there, the other type, are going to be those in escrow, and that's probably the same, about the same figure, about 500 units in escrow. So we're looking at about $1,000. That's where we're sitting currently. So back to the bank, with the training, it came into a highest and best scenario, and that's something that's still prevalent today in the market. So the radar shows a little bit green, where it's kind of going to continue on. Highest and best typically is a response for a multiple offer situation. Multiple offers, even though I suppose somebody could push to have it verified whether or not there is an additional offer. A lot of agents don't. But we have heard recently, and this is interesting, when you counter somebody back highest and best on a multiple counter stating you have other offers, there have been agents that have taken their fellow agent to task with the Board of Realtors, saying, all right, smarty, you're going to respond to us in multiple offer scenario asking for highest and best. It seems strange that I wrote on your property after it had been on the market 60 days, and through a miracle, you had an additional offer submitted basically at the same time I put one in. So what gives? Why don't you provide proof of showing your proof? And the board, I guess, from what I hear, has actually been hearing these cases, and if they can't produce that other contract with a real live person on it, I guess there's some issues. So again, don't be misled out there. Agents know the game, just be careful. But with that highest and best scenario, it's a two-pronged test, as the bank taught us, and that's still, like I said, carry through to today, highest is going to net the bank the most money. Where that was kind of interesting back when the last foreclosure cycle started is people were going into residential real estate properties that were foreclosures, and it didn't matter who the ownership was, Bank of America, Citigroup, it didn't matter. What had happened is they would go in there and they would say, okay, this property is $400,000. They would, and these are investor games too, not just regular owner, occupant, buyer games. They would offer a bunch of money more than the particular property was listed at. So who's going to get it? Well, of course they're going to get it because the bank is looking at their bottom line. What wasn't realized, and it took a while for the banks to catch on, is there's another person out there that has to approve this particular price, and that's going to be the appraiser. And the appraiser had changed the methods that they were using. Now there were other people monitoring what they were doing because of the last market fiasco. So they would go out to these properties and they would appraise them, and they'd say, well, we appreciate the buyer willing to pay $100,000 more. The property's not worth it, so it's worth $400 instead of $500. Actually, it's worth right where your list price was. But we appreciate you accepting our offer, so the bank would then adjust the value back to $400. So the bank started catching on to this, and then they started including a clause in a counteroffer to the buyer if the property appraises for less than the offering amount, the buyer to make up that difference in, the form of whatever, cash or financing. That's how they fix that. Then people weren't doing that as much as they were in the past. The other component to highest and best is going to be the best part. The best corresponds to the type of financing. Cash is, of course, king because there is no financing involved. So the cash offers typically won out when you looked at everything else across the board. But what you're going to see with cash is you're going to see that usually your financed offers are going to be a little bit more liberal with the amount that they offer. Usually cash is a little bit more constrictive, unless that number makes sense, unless it is an investor. We had some owner-occupant cash buyers. They had saved their money. They'd done a great job saving, hundreds of thousands of dollars and wanted to buy the property. They were a little bit more liberal than, let's say, an investor, a cash investor. And looking back, some of these buyers have gained $300,000 and $400,000 worth of equity between the last depressed foreclosure cycle after it kicked off. We're almost through that, so brace yourselves. The market is almost back to 1% foreclosure. It's not there yet, but it's getting close. So as far as the best goes, that has to do with financing. So besides cash, to talk about what the bank was looking for, the 20% down conventional or more, those types of loans, they love those. Anything less than 20% conventional. In the heyday of that market didn't really exist. You had 20%. But then you had stated income. You had 100% financing. And those worked out great even after the fall. You also had the FHA and the VA loans. VA made people nervous for some reason at the bank, but every once in a while we were able to impress upon them that this here is a veteran who served our country. And don't forget, even though the VA has particular standards they must adhere to when appraising residential real estate, we could give the bank confidence and say this particular property is within the VA guidelines as long as the appraiser deemed the price being okay. And I set the price, so I know they will. The rest of it, you're not going to have to pay any extra money to accept this VA offer versus this conventional offer. And that's kind of cool because then we're able to help out the veteran. So that also went on. But that's how the best part works. So that's highest and best in response to a foreclosure property. Now, again, the post I put up today, very simply, I will show you all the inventory. There's a couple links in there that I threw some resources as far as searching for the Santa Clarita foreclosures currently on the market, and then the rest of them, the distressed inventory here in Southern California that happens to be active and for sale. So that's been put up there at foreclosures.paris911.com. I'll throw that link to that in our show notes. If you are at Housing Radio, please check us out. We would love to have you listen to our shows and interact with us. And of course, you can comment on all the timelines within the radio show so we can talk about what you happen to ask and say on the next Real Estate Radio Show. HousingRadio.com. I am Connor MacIver. Thank you for listening. When you're ready for our help with your real estate representation, don't hesitate. We're here, we're ready, we're willing, we're able, and we'll talk to you soon. Connor MacIver, over and out.